that is part of the mindset shift. Here's the thing. The mindset
That's
shift
true.
will not happen if you don't desire it. So that's the challenge for, I'd say for anybody listening,
Point.
if you don't want to make that mindset shift, there's your answer. You're not going to. Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your co-hosts here with my friend, my colleague, in some ways, my mentor, someone that I've learned a lot from, especially through this series, Patsy Freeman. Patsy, welcome. Hello.
Hello there. Glad to be back. Glad to be wrapping this one up.
It's been a fun ride, actually. So if you're just joining us in this current episode, you may want to pause and go back. Let's see, 4 episodes ago, where we kicked off a 5-part series on the distinction between growing your business and growing up your business. And the basic premise is that very often leaders want to scale and grow. That's what we get hired to help clients do, is scale and grow their business. But in the process of attempting to do that, you figure out that there are some just basic foundational systems and processes that are just missing, that aren't in place, that are going to make the scaling and growing part so much more challenging. And so we've been attacking that, unpacking that in what culminates today in episode 5 of our 5-part series. So, Patsy, you want to take us through just a brief recap of the first 4 episodes? How did we get here?
I'd be happy to. And I will add to what you just said, Patrick, that sometimes leaders discover that they're actually trying to scale too soon. And they may be breaking their organization, or they may be starting to see breaks in their organization. So that was why it was a 5-part series. In the first episode, we discovered why growing up your organization matters. Why does it matter before scaling? And it ties into what I was just talking about there. You may start seeing breaks in your organization. Then we talked about building a foundation of accountability and maturity. Really, that is like, again, stepping back or taking a pause to do that. And looking at how is our senior team aligned, and how alignment at that level and throughout the organization really accelerates growth. And then my favorite, leadership readiness, growing the leaders who will grow your business. So it is a team effort.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on that. I think I don't know about episode 5 in the series, but of the first 4, that was, I think, the most content, the longest episode. Doesn't always mean the best, but man, we have a lot of thoughts on the importance of leadership. We talked about how and I just found out after we recorded that episode that something John Maxwell, I think, wrote in maybe in his most recent book or in a recent book, is that leadership is the ceiling to the growth in your organization. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the point that he probably listened to our episode and then wrote that. That's what
Sure he did.
I'm guessing that's what happens.
I'm guessing too.
I'm here to say that John steals a lot of his content from our show. So, yeah. Okay. But here as we talked about, this is episode 5 in the series. This is the bow that we're putting on this package, the capstone, as we often call the last of a series. So today, our focus is working on the business versus in the business. And that is, gosh, I feel like every CEO, that's one of the bigger laments, is I'm so immersed in it that I'm not getting to it all. I'm not, as I just had this conversation with a CEO this morning, that every conversation that you come out of with tactical action items means you're not getting to the strategic, the long-term vision, the direction, the North Star, so to speak. And so that's really where we're gonna wrap up this series, is on how to do it, a step-by-step process, why it's important, how to do it. So Patsy, I'm actually gonna ask you, what do we mean, first of all, just so we have a common understanding? I know everybody thinks they know what it means, but what is our common understanding of what it means to work in the business, on the business versus in the business? And here's a theme that has run through all of these episodes, will continue today. And I mentioned a couple of episodes ago how surprising it was to me, and I'm doing this series with you, how common, how prevalent the concept of a mindset shift for the CEO is in this whole growing up my business, why the mindset shift is so critical. So, what do you mean by working on the business versus in the business? And why does that require a mind shift for the CEO?
Oh, the way we've been talking about it, working in the business, is the day-to-day execution. Your example was perfect. I'm in a meeting as a CEO or senior team, and I come out, my to-do list is 5 times longer than it was when I went in. That is working in the business, that you're focused on the tactics. And it's understandable, especially for most CEOs, is that you've worked through the business, you've worked in the business to get to a place of senior leadership. And it is now time to work on the business, which is you step back, you look at this building system, you look at what systems need to be built, what's the structure, do you have the right leaders in place doing the right things that enable sustainable growth. So even in that, if you have the mindset that it's all up to me to do the work every day, that's one mindset. And it's really easy to get in that mindset. And many of us that have started in business with some expertise in a certain area, we're used to that. It gets built into our way of thinking, our mindset. So the shift that's required is stepping back and taking more of an organizational systems look. And it sounds easy. I said that in one sentence. It is a challenge for many, many, many of us to do.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, and it means that you're because the first mindset is we think we have to do more. We have to do more, we have to work more. And it gets actually built into our nervous system. And the truth is, you grow your business by stepping back and creating space to work on the business.
Well, if you go back to the episode we did in this series on slowing down to go fast, you called it the counterintuitive pause, because it is counterintuitive. And for many founders, for many CEOs who have grown a business, right, you did it through hard work. You did it through a willingness to do whatever is necessary. The challenge is, and we talked about this a lot in a leadership episode last time, when you get to a certain point, when you move into leadership, it's no longer about what you can do. That's a bottleneck. That's a constraint. What you yourself can do. And it becomes more about what you can get done through leading and guiding and encouraging and motivating and directing others. I think about on this, talk about the mindset shift. You and I know a CEO of a very successful company, right? I think a lot of our listeners would love to be in this position. CEO of or founder, grew a company to about 25 million in annual revenue with about $10 million in the bank. So that's a very viable business, and plans to grow the business from 25 to 50 million in about the next 10 years. And strong market, great position, unique product, great brand. And when you and I went out there to meet with the CEO, do you remember where the CEO was? Do you remember what the CEO was doing? The CEO was out there driving the forklift. The CEO was out there unloading the trucks. And in one sense, that maybe the team looks at that and goes, "Wow, that's really cool. That's they're one of us." And I think that's how you get to 25 million, but I don't know that that's how you get to 50 million. Not without, and that's really the challenge. And in fact, that's why we were out there. That's why we're having the conversation, because the question was, to be honest, the challenge wasn't coming from the CEO. The challenge was coming from the CEO's team. Members of the CEO's team who were saying, we've got these strategic priorities, these initiatives that aren't getting worked. They're not moving. And he's out there driving the forklift. He's out there unloading the truck. That would be a good example of working in the business and not on the business.
Yes. And a great example of why a mindset shift is required,
Yes. Yeah.
if desired. That's a topic for another episode, but
Well,
if desired.
I almost feel like that's that is part of the mindset shift. Here's the thing, the mindset
That's
shift
true.
will not happen if you don't desire it. So that's the challenge for, I'd say for anybody
That's a good
listening,
point.
if you don't want to make that mindset shift, there's your answer. You're not going to, because a mindset shift requires an intentional decision
Good point.
to look at it and think of it differently. So I think you made the point. I think you're right on.
Shall we look at what it takes to build just enough structure to create clarity as you build, as you build more maturity or as you grow up your business?
What do you mean by that? So, build just enough structure as you build the business. What does that what does that mean? What do you mean by that?
I mean that you want to set yourself up for success.
Mhm.
You also want to set your organization up for learning and growth. And in most organizations, especially as you're trying to mature because people don't have the resources or the skills or the behaviors in order that are needed to scale. And so you've got to meet people, you've got to meet your organization where it's at. So building just enough means doing that. Let's create enough so we can take the next step.
You say just enough structure. Are you talking about like systems and processes? Are you talking about something else? I could list off a bunch of things.
I'm talking about a
Okay.
process that involves knowing where I'm starting and knowing where I want to go and being realistic about both of those places. I'm talking about a system, a rhythm of systems, so that when you know what your steps you're wanting to take, you're actually taking them. So we call it an execution process. I would call my favorite term du jour is making it stick, making your plan stick, making what you want to accomplish stick. And as we talked about in episode 4, having the leaders that are ready to do that.
So that you're not out there driving the forklift. And I mean, that's not to insinuate your leaders should be out there driving the forklift either.
Exactly.
It's not about doing the work. It's about making sure the work gets done.
I mean, it's we're not talking about strategic planning in this episode, and we often run into people who've gone through an exhaustive strategic planning process, have literally 20 pounds of paper, or used to have 20 pounds of paper sitting on their shelf, and it stays sitting there because nothing happens with it.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm talking about building just enough. Build just enough so you can take the next step and then the next step to be success, but to build in that maturity.
Yeah. Okay. So it's almost like just in time strategy, right? Like, and that reminds me of a cup of coffee I just shared yesterday with a partner in a large law firm we were talking about strategic planning, and he shared that in the last 5 years, they've had two consultants. They paid two different consultants to come in and help them cast their vision, capture their strategic vision, and put the initiatives and the rocks in place. And the frustration on the execution team, they actually have an internal execution team. The frustration on the execution team is, to your point, let's use your phrase, we don't make it stick. Like, we pay all this money to these consultants that we've brought in to help us create a plan, and it must not. This is actually that was part of the conversation, that it must be not a good plan or not a good planning process because we aren't able to make it stick. And the more we talked about it, the more I think the realization was it really doesn't matter. We've talked about this in not just this series but other episodes, it doesn't matter how good your plan is. If you can't make it stick, if you can't walk it out, if you can't execute it, then it's always going to be a waste of money. There is no ROI in strategic planning. The ROI only comes when you execute. That's where I think um, that's the value of execution and the reason why this is the capstone episode in the series. Okay.
And if you think about growing up is not always an easy process. It's not easy for us if we're part of the senior team. It's not easy. So we have to meet ourselves and our workforce and our organization where we are and take these smaller steps, which are the appropriate steps for given where you are in any, at this point in the process. I mean, makes me think of wanting to run a marathon and I don't even own a pair of shoes. I buy a pair of shoes and go out and try to run half a marathon and I, pull a hamstring, so I don't run at all. Just you have to take it a step at a time.
I think, which is it's another great analogy of slowing down to go fast, right? To your point, I can buy a pair of shoes and start running my marathon, and I can just be in such a hurry. I could be a mile into my marathon and realize I'm actually wearing work shoes, or I'm wearing high heels, because I didn't pause to actually think through this journey and what's the right footwear for the journey that I'm on. And no one wants to see me in high heels, I promise.
I would agree with that. But what we're both talking about here, then if we look at, 5 steps to actually a roadmap, 5 steps for maturing or growing up your organization, is we have to stop. We have to stop whatever is we're doing. We have to stop long enough to get in touch with why is this important? Why is this important to me? Why is it important to our organization? And we have to create the space. We have to create the space to put ourselves in this mindset again for success and why that's important to me, why it's important to our organization.
From a practical application standpoint, what does it look like? If I'm running my company, I've got an executive team. What does stopping and creating space look like? Is that a full day offsite? Is it we work it into every single meeting? Is it is it something I do by myself?
Well, it could be many of the above. I personally think the way you have to first place you have to stop is with yourself. Where am I doing? Did I just walk into this? Did I just walk out of this meeting and my task list is 5 times longer than it was when I walked in? So we have to stop and start to look at the cues in our life, in our business, in my life, and as a leader, that are indications that what we're currently doing is not working. It could be we're not hitting our margins. It could be that we have senior leaders that aren't performing. I mean, there are cues all over the place. It could be that we have a strategic plan and we're not hitting our strategic plan. And we don't even have an execution team. So we step back and say, why is, what's not working here? And it is, and we discussed this in episode 2, it is a counterintuitive move because you as a CEO and your senior team want to do more. You want to keep producing. You want to, you just want to keep growing. You want to keep thinking if you do more, if we do hire more, if we da-da-da. So it requires some wisdom and some courage actually to stop and say, I want to learn, because it's a learned process. I want to learn how to work on my business. And I want to learn what those components are for me and for our organizations. Probably different nuances for everybody.
I'm just making notes for our Let's Get Practical for sure. I think about, I often, I said it came up in a conversation with a CEO this morning. My coaching to CEOs, senior leaders, founders is you should come out of meetings with as few action items as possible, because more often than not, those are, or at least anything tactical. It's not about taking it on. It's about taking on making sure that it gets done, but not falling to you, so that, to your point, you can, I think that's how I envision creating space, that it's creating the mental capacity
Yep.
to be able to look at the trends in our business, or the step back and look at old problems in a new way, or chronic issues from a fresh perspective. And it's just too hard to do that when you are, to your point, coming out of a meeting with a task list 5 times longer than when I went in there. So it, again, how do you come out of you're in there to lead, to guide, to manage, to direct, but not to come out with your own list of actions. Because if you're doing that, you are going to work in the business and not on the business.
So I think in addition to the mental space, it's also the space on your calendar.
That's a great point too.
One of our first guests talk about, he goes out every day at lunch and takes a walk around the block.
Right.
I'm sure you've done this. I do this too. Suggest this to senior leaders. I oftentimes get an audible gasp. It's like, how could I possibly do that? Well, that requires a mindset shift, because you have to create space in your calendar, in your life. Pause. And I don't think we're talking about stopping. We're talking about pausing long enough to get a different perspective on what's going on. So again, the 5 steps. The first one is to pause and step back.
Okay. What's step 2?
It's to assess, where are we now? So if we can pause long enough, then let's assess our current reality. We've used that with organizations, and many times they go, wow, and talking to 20 of us, this is where we should be focused, not over here, but we've been focused on the wrong thing, or the thing that isn't the most important for our efforts at this point in time. So where are we now? That can often be done through a current reality mind map. There are many other ways of doing that. And there's several areas. Look, do we have the right leadership? Do we have systems and processes in place? What are the gaps? Are we focused on what's most important? Some of those indications are, have we lost customers? Have we underproduced on customers we have? So there's a long list of things, that indications, if we just step back long enough, we can see them.
Yeah. I would add to that, all of that is great. I would add to that the importance of, as you assess where we are, to really take a hard look at why. Why are we here? Because the why will help. To me, the why always tells you what problem to solve for. So here's a real life example from a recent conversation with a CEO, where CEO had someone in the organization that wasn't bringing a problem to the CEO, right? And the CEO was surprised to hear this has been going on for a little while, and immediately drew conclusions. Well, they're not bringing it to me because they knew I'd be mad about it, or they're afraid to come to me, and in conversation, there's always the possibility that the person didn't bring it to you because to them it was a non-issue, right? And that's the importance of understanding why, right? Those are 3 different why. You can look at the same behavior. They didn't bring something to me. The first why is they're afraid of me. Okay, if that's the why, if that's the real reason why, now you know what problem to solve for. I got to fix that. If they didn't bring it to me because they thought I'd be angry, well, maybe there's a combination that's closely aligned with they're afraid of my reaction. Okay, but now you know what problem to solve for. But if they didn't bring it to you because they thought it was a non-issue, well, that's a different problem to solve for. Now you've got differences or a misalignment on what's important in the business. What should we be paying attention to? What should we be communicating with each other? So whatever, as you assess wherever you are, everything you said is right. Where are we on this? Where are we on that? A real honest, authentic look at where are we, so that we can plan out the route. But understanding why will help you put the right plan together. So you're solving. I think that it does it. I think it goes back to the importance of creating space. that if I rush to act, I see this, okay, here's where we are. Now we have to do something about it without pausing to fully understand, why are we here? Like, why are we here? Why aren't we there? What's, that extra step will help you make sure that any effort you put towards solving that problem, you'll actually see, you'll see the progress that you're hoping for.
And I like what you're saying because that moves us into the third step, which is to stabilize. We can only stabilize if we have those hard conversations and find out what's really going on. We also can stabilize by being clear. Do we know who's making what decisions? Are we all in the right roles? Are we clear about our roles? And to put some basic processes in place. Maybe one process you put in place is that you have a stabilizing pause with your senior team once a week. What's going on? Are there conversations that need to be brought forward? We were talking earlier today about elephants in the room. If we're always trying to do more and do it quickly, and we're doing that over the elephants in the room, I know where that equation ends up. You do too.
Yeah. So when you say, so step one is stop, right? Just like create that space. Step 2 is assess. Where are we? Step 3 is stabilize. What are we stabilizing? Tell me more about stabilize. What are we wanting or needing to stabilize?
We're stabilizing often the chaos. The chaos can show up in the water cooler talk at the talk at the water cooler. The morale in the office could be one place that it shows up. But we're stabilizing so we can all get ourselves on the same page. All get ourselves on the same page. So we're stabilizing many of those things I just talked about. Are we clear? Who makes decisions? Do we have the basic processes in place? So you're just pausing long enough to assess those things. And then that will lead us to, how do we get our senior leaders all aligned? I know this is a specialty of yours, and it's one that we care about very deeply. But without your senior leaders all on the same page, that is aligned, not in agreement, as we were talking about earlier, then we're not all going in the same direction, and we need to decide what that direction is. We need to unify around what direction we're going in and why we're going there. What's our purpose?
I feel like there's a meeting I've just facilitated. It's a perfect example of those 3 steps in action. It doesn't even have to take, as we say, pause or stop. We're not talking about weeks or months. Like, it can just be, these can be momentary pauses, or even, right, pause now. Like, it happens all the time, right? Okay,
Yes,
pause,
yeah.
quickly assess, stabilize, align, and we'll get to the last step. But it's a process that just, it's rinse and repeat regularly all the time. And so here's what comes to mind: just working with a leadership team on trying to assess. Let's go back to step 2, assess. Trying to assess, what is our strategic ability as an organization? Like, what is our proficiency at thinking strategically in the organization? Knowing that science says, just because everybody's wired differently, only about 5 to 7% of the population is naturally strategic, right? Where you just have that natural way of approaching looking at a problem. The rest of us have to learn it. So it's not to say that the other 93 to 95% can't be strategic. It's just, it has to be built. We have to learn it, and it can be done. So, but as an executive team, the question on the table was, where are we? Assess, right? Step 2, where are we as an organization in our strategic proficiency, in particular in our leadership roles throughout the company. And I think the stabilize step was even just that question. We realized in some of the first conversations with that executive team, members of the executive team, that we didn't even have a common understanding of what it means to be strategic. We didn't have a common definition. We didn't have a common way of evaluating of assessing our leaders in their proficiency to be strategic. So there just needed to be some stabilization at that executive team. Okay, what do you mean by it? What do you mean by it? What do you mean by it? Let's get the data out. Let's and let's see if we can come up with a common understanding of what do we mean if we're going to evaluate our organization. What does our executive team? What do we mean by the being proficient at being strategic, and that's then where I think we went into that step 4 of alignment, which, gosh, if you've listened to this show for any length of time, you know how I feel like in Vegas we've put all our chips on alignment, because it just makes you can say it either way. Alignment makes everything easier, and misalignment makes everything more complicated than it needs to be. And so, as an executive team, can we align around one definition? We talk about, doesn't mean agree. In fact, let's disagree. Let's debate. Let's have that conversation, that good, healthy conflict here, and then let's stabilize and align around one common understanding, so that we can then move forward as a business, right? So that we can do the next step, which I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, but I think what you're talking about leads us to, you're leading us naturally into the next step, which is, if as an organization you've decided that one of the most important things for you to focus on and align on is creating a strategic approach to your business, and having all your senior leaders understand where they can learn to be more strategic. Because I agree, it is a learned process for vast majority of our leaders. Is then you have to develop that. You have to build that leadership capacity and behaviors, in yourself and in your senior people. And then you have to learn how to cascade that down through the organization.
We even had to acknowledge that if 5 to 7% of the population naturally has that talent, that proficiency, then it would be probably an incorrect assumption to assume that everybody on the executive team has it, right? Just by law of averages. Not to say they can't develop it or haven't developed it, but it just doesn't come naturally. And so, to your point, if we're going to lead and develop others, I know this will make you happy when I say it, like, we have to first lead ourselves. So, yeah.
Yes. No, but what we're talking, it's an iterative process, right? It's not a one and done. And it gets complex and multidimensional overnight if I'm trying to learn to be strategic myself, operate on a senior team that is wanting to align, but I want my opinion, I want to agree. And then we are trying to stop the frenzy, the chaos of continuing to do more. That right there is just 3 components going on at the same time, for me, for you, and for our team.
All the time.
All the time.
Right.
And it's easy to lay it out as 5 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not. And sometimes you have to go back to step 1. So it is an iterative process. It's chaotic. And it can be incredibly successful very quickly by, practicing some of what we're talking about, especially the stop and the pause.
And I think yes to all of that. And I think you can really get into a good rhythm. What's interesting about those steps, right? Stop, assess, stabilize, align, lead. There's no forklift driving in there. There's no unloading trucks. I don't mean to pick up, because again, here's the thing. I think what I want the listener to understand is that's not a one-time thing for that leader, like for that particular founder. That's where you will find him most of the time, is out on the floor, doing the job of a first week employee. And it's admirable, but it means that there's no stopping, there's no assessing, there's no, I shouldn't say no. It's just time taken away from working on the business. So where I was going is, the more you do this, the more you, first of all, you'll begin to make more progress, and you will begin to grow up your business so that you can then the scaling and growing follows. And you'll get really good at this. You can master this process. The listeners who are really great at working on the business got there by doing it. Like, got there by, whether it's this process or following their own process to extract themselves from the day to day. You can master this, and then you ultimately, you stay out of your people's way.
I had a client earlier this week say, we're having little glimmers of progress. And what it did to her attitude, her approach, her optimism was palpable.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it is those little steps, and all those little steps add up.
So let's talk about, let's maybe bring it home with how do we make it stick? Because it is all about execution. I mean, everything, I'd say everything that we do, we talk all the time about alignment. It's not alignment for the sake of alignment. It's alignment for the sake of execution. We talk about leader readiness, leadership development. It's for the sake of execution. And every time we talk about culture, it's not so that we can say we have happy people. That's nice, but it really is happy people execute better, right? They're more engaged. They're more likely to go above and beyond, which is where all this strategy stuff lives. So how do you make it stick, Patsy? I'm hoping you can wave the magic wand and just give us all a nice, easy answer. I'm ready to write it. What is it?
Get out your magic wand.
Yes.
Let's see. So I will reiterate that a roadmap is useless without rhythms for execution
Mm.
and processes. And we mentioned this earlier. There's some kind of foundational pieces to have in place, and that is understand who makes what decisions. Without that, we can see we get chaotic already. But the part we really want to talk about today is putting systems in place for actually having success on what we care about, bringing that to fruition. So the start is the roadmap. Where are we now? Where do we want to go?
Mhm.
We know there's always a gap. Um, and you can do that. I mean, one thing we didn't mention when we're talking about current reality, there's some tools and some maps and some models out there where you can actually assess, data, get some data in your pool. Where are we now? You can also do that internally, but get a pretty good understanding of where are you now and where do you want to go. That does require stopping long enough to bring your people together to do both of those things. Probably not at the same time. A lot of the where do we want to go now is developed by your senior team. But those two pieces have to be in place. Then the piece that Patrick, we see that gets started but not implemented so it sticks is creating a cadence, a rhythm of working on the pieces that you have determined are the most important pieces that you want to accomplish. And that requires a cadence of meetings, regular meetings that are focused on the strategic aspects, the most important aspects of what do you want to do. You should not come out of those meetings with anything tactical written down on your on your to-do list. This is a skill in itself. You're talking about how few people actually think strategically naturally. We are doing machines, so when we go into a execution meeting, we want to do more. It's not about doing more. It's about looking at working on the business. So meetings, process, you follow consistency, and who are the right people to have in the room to have those conversations. Yes, it is a lot of your senior team, but there's some key people in your organization that can be champions for this process. Those that think strategically, those who are content experts. But gather your core group together and create a rhythm of business. Create it for 3 months, then stop and assess how's this working. Readjust and do it the next 3 months.
Is that what you say? Weekly for 3 months, bi-weekly for 3 months, once a month for 3 months? What do you think? What do you recommend? What have you seen?
I think that it's at a minimum once a month. If it's once a month for this kind of integration execution team, then it should at least be visited every other week with your senior leadership team. How's it going? What input? What are we learning? The first couple of months, it's like, what are we learning? This is hard. What are we learning? People don't know how to do this. What are we learning? So that's where the next piece comes in is feedback loops. Steady progress towards goals requires feedback. What are we learning? How's this affecting our culture? What do I need as a leader need to learn next?
What's working? What's not working?
Exactly.
Right.
So it's another place to stop, bring in current reality, remind ourselves where we want to go and get back on track. It's also opportunities to learn.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about go back to the GPS, or no, I should say the roadmap, the where are you, where do you want to go? I always think of a GPS, and the feedback loops, that to me, that's the function of your GPS while you're on the journey. So, like, if I'm mapping out going from point A to point B using my GPS, I don't get in my truck and then turn it off. I don't turn off the GPS. I allow it to inform me. What are we learning on the journey? And sometimes what we're learning is, hey, there's a slowdown up ahead that you might consider needing to reroute a little bit, or sometimes the GPS might inform you that what we're learning is now's not a good time to embark on this journey because you're not, whatever, for whatever reason. So I think that's how do you as the leader play the role of or facilitate that kind of information, that kind of informing along the way of the journey, and not just sticking straight to the original plan, because if we somehow veer off course, it's failure or it's not good execution. Like, to me, every executing every plan requires that you're constantly gathering, again, what's working and what's not working. And there's the humility and the agility and other illities that I can't think of to be able to adjust as you're going along to make sure that you're not leading people off a cliff just because I said that's where we're going. It's like, no, it's okay. How do we adjust?
It's really hard to do too. So, and we also get outside information, right? That's another course correction. Maybe the road is closed. Maybe there's a hurricane up ahead. Da 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 da. Maybe what we thought was white was actually black. So the process is about gathering information so we can stay on the journey, and we have to course correct. What do they say? Airplanes are off track 90-something% of the time.
So here's now I'm going to parallel that back to working in the business versus working on the business. It's very easy to get in your car and have complete tunnel vision and just go from point A to point B without ever pausing to gather data, right? To assess, to potentially reroute. One way is either way you get to your destination, but one way is a perhaps bumpier, longer ride. Whereas the other, again, it requires to step back, not have that tunnel vision, gather data, assess, adjust, learn, and it's more managing the trip than, yeah.
I'm smiling. Our listeners can't hear me smiling, but I recently went to an event about an hour and a quarter away from where I live with some friends, and the driver pushed the destination into the GPS on the car. And we were supposed to get there an hour early. I kept seeing signs to our destination. I kept pointing them out, and the driver kept saying, "No, I have it in my GPS. This is where we're going." We were an hour and 15 minutes late. We drove about 50 to 60 miles out of our way. Everybody was a frenzied mess.
Yeah.
And we didn't pause. We didn't pause at each intersection to look at the signs. And I was like, wow,
Yeah.
we can be too trusting. Which then leads to another really important piece. We have to have champions.
Hmm.
Those people that either naturally think strategically or are willing to learn, because we need input. We need people to point out road signs at intersections that perhaps we don't see. And we have to be willing to listen and then determine as a group, what's the right next action for us to take here? Do we need, you know, more content input? What do we need? So those are some of the components. Once you start to put those together to create space, time, and build the competency and the behaviors, which is what you talked about earlier, to work on the business, not in the business.
That's what if you think about the whole point of this series is um, building the maturity, the infrastructure, the foundation upon which you can then scale and grow. And so we're talking about building mature leaders. We're talking about, I love that, the idea of building champions, champions in the organization who model, the new way and leadership and inspire and deliver. It's just, again, how much easier, listener, would it be to scale and grow if you had that in your organization, if you had those champions? Now, everybody has their tribe, everybody has their right hand, people that they can go to. The question is, are they champions or are they commiserators, right? Like, are these people that I can really count on to help us scale and grow, or are these just people I go and I vent to and I complain to, and we complain together about our stagnation or our plateaus or our frustrations, whatever it may be. One will get you where you ultimately want to go, that growth and that scaling and growing and going from 25 to 50 million. And I think the others, you'll just find yourself stuck. You'll have plenty of things to complain about and plenty of people to complain to, but it's not going to get you ultimately where you want to go. That's why this is so critical to the scaling and growing part.
What you just described is a very different journey than the one we've been talking about for the last 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. I agree. Okay. Is there anything else you would want to add before we round third, head home, and end as we always do with let's get practical.
Well, I would add that it is a choice. And with that choice, because it is an iterative process of growth and readjustment, that it requires a lot of compassion and a lot of courage. And as you focus on what's most important to you as a leader and to you as in your organization. So we can get thrown off our North Star, or we can get thrown off, yeah, our North Star.
I almost feel like it's all God.
No, that's really where that's where the passion and the purpose and the commitment comes from.
As I say, that's the importance of the North Star, is so that you know how to get back on course whenever without a North Star, you don't even necessarily know that you don't even know that you're off course. You just, like, something doesn't feel right, but you don't know if you're on the right track or not.
And I would say, and then we can wrap this up, I think there's a North Star for your business. And there's a North Star for you as a leader.
How did I know that's where you were going to go?
No. So it's another way of alignment.
Mm. How? Okay, I just have to ask. Can those two be? Do they? How do they coexist? How do they coexist? My North Star and the North Star of the business that I run, or don't they coexist, or do they need to coexist? I don't know what the question is. I'm just. What happens if they don't?
Well, I think you'll get discord, you'll get chaos, you'll get confusion, you'll get many of the things we've been talking about that are indicators of a less mature organization. And ultimately, you'll get, if you're, the CEO, senior leaders listening to this, you're not going to be very happy in your job. There's not going to be a sense of well-being. There's not going to be a sense of satisfaction. You're not going to have, now you can get me really started. You're not going to have leaders that feel the same way. You're not going to have a culture that's vibrant.
Right. What I'm thinking, I'm smiling, and our listener can't hear that. We talked about this over lunch today. We were talking about alignment and how important, how critical that has become for us in the work that we do, and the work that we as we work with organizations, just getting them to align. And you made the point at lunch, and you're talking about it here. The importance of, and you always bring me back to this, the importance of, as important as it is for me to align with my team, for our team to align, it is just as important, if not more important, for me to align with myself. And I always ask, what does that mean? Like, tell me more about that. What is that? But I think there's a great example that you're just talking about is if I am misaligned, if my own North Star is misaligned with my organization's North Star, first of all, I'd say as the leader, well, fix it. You're in a role that you're one of the few people who has the authority and the position and the ability to find alignment. How do you align those two? But if you can't, then you do have to ask, is this the right place for me? I don't know. I mean, because to your point, you can build something that is what somebody else might look at and say is very successful, but it may suck the life out of you. And that's right. That will come through I would argue that will be an inhibitor to your own ability to grow your business. Like there's some work that needs to be done there. And that's part of the growing up the business.
Absolutely.
Okay. Should we talk about some takeaways, key takeaways? So this is our Let's Get Practical, short little snippets, pieces of advice, things that our listeners can do immediately, or concepts they can hopefully grasp easily to begin making progress. And what we've been talking about today is to get better at growing, at focusing on their business and not in the business.
I want to say, if you're a senior leader and you're leaving a meeting and your to-do list has just increased fivefold, then stop.
Yes.
You're needing to learn how to delegate.
That's very practical. Yeah. Yep. What else?
I would also say that a roadmap includes a starting point and an ending point.
Mm-hmm.
So know what your current reality is and know what your vision, your goal is for some period of time. So those are the two I would add first.
Okay. I will add, because again, this is just a theme through all of these episodes, and that is working on the business versus in the business. It requires a mindset shift, because it may not come naturally to you. You may be deep down, you may be a forklift driver, but in your role, that's not working on the business. If you're driving a forklift, who's working on the business? And so it's a mindset shift, but the mindset shift will only happen if you want it to. It's a choice. And so that's first. Second is this concept of creating space. It's interesting that we and I came at it from different perspectives. I love that. that yes, it does mean intentionally stopping the madness, stopping the chaos, stopping the tactical to be able to create the mental capacity. But to your point, it also means creating physical space on the calendar. It might, to some, again, you talked about Mark Williams is the one who would get out and go for walks. To him, it wasn't just carving out time on his calendar; it was getting out of the environment where he tends to be more tactical. Just changing the environment so that he created a new environment where he was able to be more. It was more synonymous with creating the mental and the physical space. So creating spaces mentally and physically. What would you add?
I would add that change, whether it's growing up your business or growing your business or growing up yourself or growing yourself, is an iterative process.
Yeah.
It's not a one and done. It requires courage and compassion, learning, course corrections.
So far, I have to say, all the ones you said were on my list. So you stole them. Stop looking at my paper. That's, I think, what I want to
I
say.
would add one more, which I would be remiss in. Whether you're a CEO or senior team leader listening, or you're anybody in an organization, because leadership can happen anywhere in the organization. Know your own North Star
Mm.
and see if it aligns with the North Star of your organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, you've got that. I go back to our, was it episode 7, 8, like way back in the beginning when we had Kathleen Johnson. And she talked about cognitive dissonance, the cognitive dissonance that happens when people see you saying one thing, but they can just tell from your presence that you're in a different place, right? Or the cognitive dissonance that happens between the role that you have and how you show up. And there's definite cognitive dissonance waiting to happen if my North Star misaligns with the organization that I've been tasked to lead. So you're going to have to resolve that. I'm going to add one more and then I'll be done.
Okay.
I just want to, you said it earlier, growing up is not easy. And growing up your business is not easy. It takes courage. But I would argue that if you're in that role, listener, you're in that role, not if, you're in that role. You're in that role for a reason. You've got this. You can do this. And it just takes courage and takes discipline and diligence. But yeah, it's not going to be easy. And I think at least understanding it's not going to be easy, then you don't feel like you're failing when it gets a little challenging. You don't feel like you're doing it wrong when it's hard.
And it can be incredibly rewarding and have an amazing success. And the last one I would add is make it stick. Create processes. Bring the people together. Try it out. Keep it going so that you make what you care about stick.
Yeah, you're right. That's the execution is, otherwise it's just a plan, right? Otherwise there's no ROI in planning and creating a roadmap. It always comes in walking it out. Awesome. All right. Patsy, we did it. We completed a 5-part series on growing up your business. Well done. Thank you. I appreciate all of your wisdom, your strategic insight in putting this whole thing together from start to finish. I appreciate you very much.
You're more than welcome. It's an important piece.
Yep. Excellent. Listener, you can find this episode's Let's Get Practical, as well as all of our previous Let's Get Practicals on our website at thelionsgroupconsulting.com. Just click on the podcast tab. You can also, if you haven't engaged with us on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and LinkedIn, please do so. Like and share, comment, tell us what's working, what's working and what's not working, so that we can adjust our journey as we see, as we need to. Anything else, Patsy, for the good of the cause? We're good.
Go out there and lead with
Yeah,
courage and compassion.
that's great advice. Thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. We'll see you next time.